Hola, bio! Okay, so I was going to give you a video about cloning, but I thought more carefully about what we're doing right now, and it makes more sense to just do a little bit of a review of the cell cycle. Hopefully this will reinforce some of the things that you saw looking at onion root tips underneath the microscope today. So, let's jump right into it. Okay, so the cell cycle is obviously a cycle, so there is no beginning and no end. But I'm going to pick at a beginning just to impose. Oh, that was a terrible circle. Excuse me. Oh, okay, so Navazi just came in to talk to me, and I have no idea where I left off, but I think I was making a circle. Okay, so the cell cycle. Obviously, it's a cycle. You can pick anywhere to start, and I am going to pick right here to start. So, draw a little loop-de-loo around part of the circle. So this part of the cycle, we're going to start here. This is called G1. It stands for growth or gap 1. And you can call it either. You'll hear people calling it the growth phase or the gap phase. Either one is perfectly fine. So, in G1, this is like the stage of normal living things. So, during this phase, while the cell is growing or gapping, there's cellular respiration occurring. If you're a plant cell, there's photosynthesis. What else? There's always protein synthesis. Membrane transport. So all the normal things that a cell needs to do to stay alive are happening during this G1 phase. And overall, I know I said it before, but I'm going to include it again right here, it's also growing in size. So, at the very beginning of the year, kind of the beginning of the year, the middle of the first term, we talked about surface area to volume ratio. So you should be aware now that as the cell is growing in size, it's getting bigger, the surface area to volume ratio is actually decreasing, and this is bad for the cell because the rate of diffusion stays the same, but the surface area is decreasing, so we need more stuff to accommodate for the bigger volume, but the amount of surface area per unit of volume that we have is going down. So, membrane transport, the process of bringing things into the cell, is impeded because, again, we don't have the surface area. So, keep that in the back of your mind, that as the cell is growing, the surface area to volume ratio is going down, and that's not so bueno. Okay, back to the cell cycle. The next phase, oh, that was a bad line. Let me draw it again. The next phase here, is called the S phase. And the S phase stands for synthesis. And what's being synthesized here is the DNA. So during this phase, we have DNA replication. So during the S phase, the DNA all doubles. Just like the video that you all created of DNA replication, that's going on inside the cell, but for all of the DNA. Okay, and then, following S phase, we have another G phase. This is called G2, and it's a second growth or gap phase. And all the same things that are happening during G1, this normal living stuff, where the cell's doing cellular respiration, photosynthesis, protein, growing in size, yada yada yada, that's all happening as well during the G2 phase. And remember, keep in the back of your mind that while the cell is growing, the surface area to volume ratio is going down, and that is bad for the cell. So, what happens next? Well, this is called the M phase, this last phase right here. And the M phase is the cellular division phase. But cellular division is actually made up of two parts. The first part is called mitosis. M-I-T-O-S-I-S. And the second part is cytokinesis. And they both make up for the M phase. So mitosis is the act of splitting up and dividing stuff that's found within the membrane. So mostly dividing chromosomes. Cytokinesis is responsible for dividing up the rest of the stuff So cytokinesis is responsible for dividing everything else. Mitosis, again, the chromosome stuff inside the nucleus, or within the nucleus. Cytokinesis is everything else, like, for example, the smooth and rough ER, all the ribosomes, all the mitochondria, if you're a plant cell, the chloroplast. So making sure everything that's within the cytoplasm gets divided equally. Okay, so this is the cell cycle, and every cell in your body goes through the cell cycle. And cells that are rapidly dividing will go through this again and again and again and again. However, some cells exit the cell cycle, and so they go after a phase of a mitotic phase, a dividing phase. They go into what's called G0 or G0. And this G0 phase is a phase of no more growth and no more division. So for example, neurons enter the G0 phase. They are not dividing or growing anymore. Okay, so, I wanted to stress that during the M phase, this surface area to volume ratio bit, once the cell divides again, the surface area to volume ratio is restored. And this whole thing, this whole process, allows for the resetting of surface area to volume ratio, number one, the growth of an organism. So, for example, you started out as one cell, but now you are many. That all happens through this process. And then it also allows for the growth and repair of old or damaged tissue. So when you get a cut, for example, the cell cycle is happening rapidly in order to replenish all the cells that were damaged there. Or as you grow new hair, for example. That's growth of cells in your hair follicle. Okay, but we divide the cell cycle actually up into two distinct parts. The G1, S, and G2 are all part of something that is called interphase. And then within the mitotic phase, you have 4 different parts that you learned about today. The first part is called prophase. The second part, I'm just going to do this all in the same color. So this part's called prophase. The second part is called metaphase. The third part of the M phase is called anaphase. And the last little bit is telophase and cytokinesis. So these are the different phases that you are looking at today. under the microscope. You saw interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and then telophase cytokinesis. That's what we are observing with the onion root tip cells. Okay, that is it for this screencast on the cell cycle. If you have any questions, I guess I will talk about them tomorrow in class. Okay.